Hello folks, I hope that you're having just a great day today. Today I want to take a look at another short story from this collection that I have of H.P. Lovecraft's favorite weird tales. We're going to be taking a look, he divides this into kind of two sections. The first section is on the literary weird tale, which are some of these classic short stories by people like, Ambrose Bierce, Edgar Allan Poe, Arthur Machen, Algernon Blackwood, these sort of classic horror short stories that really influenced the genre and are his favorite short stories. And then he has a second section in here on the popular weird tale, which I've been doing kind of a deep dive into for you folks. So now let's take a look at The Canal by Everil Worrell. Now, Everil Worrell was a female writer during the pulps, which is unusual during the pulp era. There just weren't a whole lot of female writers like C.L. Moore, Lee Brackett. There just aren't that many of them out there. So, the fact that here we have one of her things, and she's considered by, H.P. Lovecraft to be one of the best writers of a horror short story called The Canal in the mid-20s for Weird Tales. A magazine that Lovecraft was also famous for writing for. That's how a lot of people still know about him today. So we'll be taking a look at this horror classic. Now, Everil Worrell was writing under her maiden name. She was somebody who published 18 short stories for weird tales. This is one of them, and it's considered a classic. Now, in the early 30s, H.P. Lovecraft went back and looked at his backlog of catalogs of all of his old weird tales collections and reread all the stories. And he selected what he considered to be the best short stories in the entire canon of weird tales. And The Canal is one of them, by one of the masters of horror. So let's take a look at The Canal today. Let's take a little bit of time and I agree with him. I think it's a very well done story. I give it a 9 out of 10. I think it's incredibly strong as a story. I think that the author does a great job with this lush scenery. Now, in my collection, it's 19 pages long. I just reread it again last night. It took me about 40 minutes to read. Her use of language is a little bit slower to read. It's more like a C.L. Moore than it is a Robert E. Howard. Or H.P. Lovecraft than a Robert E. Howard. You can probably read a large, I can at least read a large page of H.P. Lovecraft in like maybe 2 minutes a page, but with Robert Howard it's closer to like maybe 70 or 80 seconds a page for these large oversized reprintings. So I can get through a Howard thing much faster than I can get through one of his peers like Clark Ashton Smith. Well, this one also took me about 2 minutes a page too. Just reading it yesterday for you for the second time. Now, I read this collection in one sitting at an airport. With a delay in the airports, but that's more than 10 years ago. So one of the things I'm doing myself is going back and rereading a lot of these short stories. And I remember going back and rereading a short story. And at first I was like, The Canal, I remember reading it, I remember some of the highlights, but then I was like, when I went back and reread it, I just was reacquainted with all of the great things that I loved about this short story the first time I read it about 12 or 13 years ago. This collection is now almost 15 years old. It was published in about the mid-2000s. So again, I'll link you to it in case you're interested in checking it out below. I'll also try to find you a free version online, since things that were published in the mid-20s, the 1920s, not the 2020s, tend to not have their copyright date in front of them. So I'll try to link you to that in the comments below. Let's go ahead and get started with The Canal. So The Canal is going to open up and we're going to be following this gentleman who has developed a reputation in this city that it's being set in as somebody who's a little bit different, a little bit odder, a little bit unusual, or with some darker desires. He takes midnight walks. He enjoys spending time at the graveyard in solitude. He will walk where people in the city don't. He will regularly sort of make fun of the fact that most people they're in herds. They have to do things a certain way. They don't think about things or do things in a particular way. They don't go outside themselves. They don't go outside the sort of trends and what they've been brought down from them. So they are not people that are really worthy of living their lives. They're not living their lives. They're not living for a free life, and he is. Sure, some of his friends, his co-workers may make a little bit of fun of him, and he's a little bit more of an introverted person, so he doesn't have that many friends anyway. That's fine. Dude's living his life. So that guy's going to be our protagonist. And he is, at the beginning, he is going to have encountered something that is going to really thrown him. And he basically says in the first page that what he is doing is he's giving sort of his last statement, if you will, before he commits suicide, knowing that what's happening is, and what he's about to say is going to make him viewed as a madman, understanding that, but still he needs to get it out for purposes of telling of the truth. And then he's going to start talking about one of his wanderings one night in the city, and he wanders to this water channel that's in the city, a canal. And by the canal, he is going to see this old rotten boat, and on the boat is this younger girl. And he calls out to her, and she responds, and they have a conversation from the shore. And while talking to her, he realizes that this is the first time he's ever really started to fall for a woman. He is somebody who's always been more attracted by books, by knowledge, by unusual things than he has by women. So it clearly seems like he's maybe asexual, and which will make him probably one of the first asexual characters that I've read in the pulp era. Somebody who just has not really been attracted to the opposite sex or to his own sex either. He doesn't seem like he's gay. He's just surprised, and he's all of a sudden like, "Is this what love is like?" As he talks to her, he realizes that he really likes her. He thinks she's really attractive. He'd like to kiss her, and so as he's having a conversation with him, he's like, "This is weird," and that's a scene that whole revelation of what attraction to a woman actually is like is a very interesting scene, and I think that our writer has done a really good job with that scene. And it's one scene it's probably the scene that stuck with me the most. And again, as somebody who is asexual, I also see him as probably asexual too. He wasn't dating anybody, who wasn't something. So, that also is the character who has stuck with me too. But anyway, we'll continue the story. He's attracted to her. He wants to get to know her more. She's not telling that much about herself. She clearly seems a little bit, distracted by something else that's going on. Her dad is asleep and with her. It seems like maybe he doesn't want her to wake up, so he's not going to have the conversation for too long. But ultimately, he will leave with a pledge of a fidelity to her, and that he will follow her commands. And she agrees that she will meet him in the city, but after a couple of conditions are met that will allow her to join him up with the city, and then they'll journey together. What are those conditions? Are they going to happen? What's happening? What is this woman? What is her father? You'll find out a whole lot more about that stuff going on. Now, I do like this short story as kind of an on-ramp for pulp stories. If you're not familiar with pulp horror stories or what they were like, they can be a little weird or a little bizarre. But this one actually follows modern horror tropes. It reads much more like it's a modern horror story, which I think is to its benefit. There's a reason why this horror short story has been anthologized a lot. It actually reads like a horror story that might have been written in the 80s or the 90s. It has that sort of a pace, timing. It's not that long. It's got a lot of great details. It doesn't read with all, a lot of the pulp stories really read like they're in the pulps. They have, an offensive number of adjectives, adverbs, these like archaic terms like cyclopean are regularly used in them, but this doesn't read like it. And I think it's to its benefit. So I think if you're out there and you're like, I wonder what a pulp horror story would actually be like, but you've never actually taken the time to read it, why not start with the Canal? I think that you would probably be doing yourself a favor because there's something that happens in the Canal that plays into the modern horror trope. That plays into your understanding of the modern horror tropes. The pulp era was before horror was tropified, and before it painted travel area, and before that, which is why I like reading horror short stories from this era, because they're fresh, they're new, they aren't following, the zombie trope, the vampire trope, the werewolf trope, right? That we have today that follow a certain, creed of things that have to happen, and so I enjoy the older horror stories because they can breathe on their own, live on their own, and over these modern stories that have been overly tropified, right? And so that's why I enjoy it a lot more. So this story is, I think, a very, very strong story because it has a subtrope element into it that reads like a modern trope. So if you're familiar with modern tropes in horror or movies or TVs or video games, something's going to happen in this story that I think plays into that, which is good for a new reader who's taking a deep dive into a pulp wars. So there you are. I'll leave you to it. Have you read The Canal? What'd you think of it? Did you agree or disagree with anything that we talked about here in this video? I'd be really happy to talk about you with it further in the comments below. If you enjoyed this video, please feel encouraged to hit that subscribe button because there's going to be a lot more of these to follow. And finally, hey, I just want to thank you for taking some time out of your day and watching my video. We all have so many things that are happening in our lives these days, and we're being pulled in so many different directions by all these different medias, channels, televisions, all those things that are out there. So the fact that you spent this time with me, that's humbling, and I appreciate it. So thanks again, and have a great day.